Stephen King's The Dark Tower has finally arrived in theaters after a long and complicated journey to the big screen. However, Hollywood's latest attempt to launch a cinematic universe didn't exactly go as planned. The movie was widely panned by critics and opened to a disappointing $19.5 million haul. This was still good enough for first place, but the movie's lackluster performance with critics and audiences can only be seen as a disappointment, for both the studio as well as for King fans who waited years to see the books brought to life. Here's what went wrong with The Dark Tower's big screen debut. And a friendly warning, spoilers for both the movies and the books lie ahead. Source material misread. The many stories King penned in the Dark Tower universe span quite a lot of plot, but the studio decided to mix and match elements from all of them, which still wound up being a sequel to the books rather than an adaptation.
So we actually took the world and sort of stitched it a little bit together without sort of losing the promise of greater adventures.
The groundwork was laid at the end of the 7th book of King's saga, when our hero Roland Deschain finally reaches the top of the Dark Tower and realizes he'd been on this long journey many times before. While picking the movie up where the final book leaves off may have seemed like a smart way for the filmmakers to boil down the novel's epic scale into just one film, it was also alienating to the hardcore fans who'd been hoping to see the actual events of the novels themselves play out on screen. The Dark Tower also straddled the difficult line of trying to appeal to those who hadn't read any of the books and those who'd read every word. That effort to please fans and make the content digestible enough for new audiences simply didn't work, adding up to a movie that didn't give anyone what they were looking for. While the movie did a fair job of setting up its central quest story, it failed to sell the deeper conflicts inherent in the epic journey of the characters and felt incomplete. Speaking of which, runtime rut. Nowadays, viewers who walk into big-budget blockbusters expect to be in the theaters for at least 2 hours, and often more. The Dark Tower easily could have filled up this runtime. In fact, it probably would have helped its awkward attempt to fit so many disparate elements from King's novels into one movie.
Do they have guns and bullets in your world?
You're gonna like Earth a lot.
Director Nick Arcel, however, decided to instead keep the film at a very tight 95 minutes. The director said he did this because he saw the film as an introduction to the world of the novels, adding that the movie had a lean script that would introduce the basic ideas of the project without being too overwhelming at first. While this runtime may have been doable had Arcel chosen to only focus on the first book, the movie's decision to mix and match elements from all of King's books as a pseudo-sequel meant it had to introduce huge amounts of information while playing out its story. Although Arcel saw the short runtime as a way to build the world without doing too much, some saw it as being too brief, leaving the world feeling empty and unfinished. The movie could have benefited from an extra 30 minutes of world building, if not more. Filmmaking fracas. Arcel wasn't the first director to try his hand at adapting The Dark Tower. In 2007, J.J. Abrams pulled together his lost pals Carlton Cuse and Damon Lindelof, who were also big fans of Stephen King, but they ended up letting go of the adaptation option because they were too nervous about messing up the beloved work. That's when Ron Howard stepped up to the plate with a plan for 3 movies and a TV series to bring the story to life. The project was set up at Universal Pictures, but the studio pulled the plug on that expensive idea. And it took 3 more years for the movie rights to find another home with Media Rights Capital and Sony Pictures. But that wasn't the end of the behind-the-scenes drama. MRC and Sony were reportedly unhappy with an early cut of the film and considered bringing in a more experienced director to do another cut. That cost would have been too high, though, so they shelled out funding for reshoots amid creative collisions. All that infighting led to the release date being pushed back a whopping 3 times, which probably tipped fans off to how troubled this production was.
The tower will fall.
Bad buzz. Whether it was a result of behind-the-scenes turmoil or just a strategy, advertising for The Dark Tower ended up being rather minimal. The first trailer didn't arrive until early May, 3 months before the film's release, and was overshadowed by other more high-profile genre movies. By being stingy with promotional materials, the studio may have been trying to avoid oversaturation, but that plan clearly backfired. 2 weeks before its release, it failed to even track in the top 10 movies being talked about on social media, despite a largely ignored video game offering. And the only thing that really got people talking was when critics completely eviscerated the movie. It's debatable how much influence bad reviews actually have on audiences, but the fact that this film is dangerously close to a 1-digit Rotten Tomatoes rating probably didn't encourage people who are on the fence about seeing the pick to buy a ticket. Turning to TV. The Dark Tower may have been a box office disappointment, but Sony and MRC still seem to be moving ahead with at least one aspect of the franchise. While there's no word yet on whether the planned movie sequels will move forward, the TV show made a major step just before the film was released by adding The Walking Dead's Glenn Mazzara as a showrunner. The TV series is said to be a prequel to the books, focusing on King's Wizard and Glass novel. While that means it'll likely have a different feel than the films, it'll see the return of Idris Elba's Roland, Tom Taylor's Jake, and others. It's still very early in that process, but the hiring of Mazzara hints that it could be getting off the ground soon. The group is hoping to begin production in 2018, so it looks like the Dark Tower hasn't fallen just yet.
You were in very bad shape. I'm surprised you're even sitting up.
I'm stronger than most.
Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.